It is currently 2:30 on Thursday afternoon. I am supposed to be at the writers group, but I'm not. And that's because today I ended up dropping every little plan I had to stay home and finish reading The Strawberry Thief by Joanne Harris. It has been a long time since I started reading a book and ended up just forgetting about everything else in the world. And that has happened today. This usually happens with the books featuring Vianne Rocher. It happened 12 years ago when I first started reading The Lollipop Shoes. I feel as though I ought to go back and tell the story of my history reading Joanne Harris's works. I believe it was Christmas of 2007, and I had asked for a copy of her book Rune Marks, which was going to be the first in her children's young adult series set after Ragnarok with the Norse gods. And my mother saw that book, and being my mother, also saw another book called The Lollipop Shoes, also by Joanne Harris. She didn't realise that they were two separate genres, and why should she? At this point, I was probably about 15 years old. I had no prior knowledge of Joanne Harris or Chocolat. None of that. And it's one of those stories where it was still the Christmas holiday. I'd never planned on reading The Lollipop Shoes, but there was a line for the toilet at home, and I was sat in my bed early in the morning, so I picked up the closest book to me, and that was The Lollipop Shoes. And immediately I was pulled in to this story, and I ended up reading that book quite quickly. It became a new favourite. By the time I got back to school 2 weeks later, I was telling everyone about it. This was in the days of MySpace, and when it came to that September, and I'd read it a few times at this point, and we had to write a piece of fiction based on a work of fiction that was already out there, I chose The Lollipop Shoes, and I sent Joanne Harris a message. I don't even know if it was her MySpace page or anything related to a question I had. And I got a response, and I ended up writing my own response to The Lollipop Shoes. I then proceeded to acquire any book of Joanne Harris's that came out. And whilst I have enjoyed her work for years, it is Vianne Rocher's story that has always enthralled me. After The Lollipop Shoes, I did end up reading Chocolat, and it didn't fill me with the same thrill that The Lollipop Shoes did. I don't think that any book that preceded that book would leave me feeling in quite the same way. A few years down the line, it was announced that we would be returning to Vianne Rocher's world with Peaches for Monsieur le Collet. And when I first started this channel, you will have seen me discussing that book a lot. If I still have the blog post up, I will leave a link to that in the description, because that also captured me. And yet, it's been years since I read that book. I've read other books by Joanne Harris since. You've seen them mentioned on this channel. You've seen me mention The Blue Salt Road and A Pocketful of Crows. You've seen the different things that I've read. Yet this one, I didn't intend to read in a day. I thought that my reading habits had changed, that I would not find it in me to just drop everything. And yet last night, I was putting away the books from my mid-year freak out tag video, and I thought, let's just read the first chapter. And I did. And then I read another chapter. And I'm going to admit that this was after midnight, and I was particularly tired. So after 100 plus pages, I finally decided to put the book down. So I didn't give up sleep for this book, although I did consider it. However, as soon as I woke up. The book was on my mind. And now we're here. I feel as though maybe I should tell you what this book is about, but my mind is a bit boggled, so please forgive me. The Strawberry Thief returns us to Lansquenet. This is the world of Vian Rocha. This time around, we also get to hear the voices of Renaud, the priest, and Vian's daughter, Rosette. Rosette is viewed as an almost fairy tale child. She's seen as simple by the people within this village because at the age of 16 she is non-verbal and still has the playfulness of a child. She hasn't let it go. And this constant metaphor surrounding her as being somewhat cat-like. There is a cantankerous old man called Narcisse in this village, and the only person he seems to have time for is Rosette. Upon his death, she is left a patch of land. But his death and the loss of his shop also coincides with the arrival of a new woman who seems to rival Vian with her magic. And I won't spoil who the character ends up being, but I don't actually know that she was important to the narrative, because this is a story of mirrors, really. Everybody has their darker reflections and everybody is hiding something. And this is a book that's pointing out that sometimes people have to let go of their darkness in order to find peace. Sometimes we bottle things up in such a way that is harmful. That isn't all this book is about. This book felt like a fairy tale. And I know we have seen Joanne Harris release her own folk tales and fairy tales over the last few years, but this felt very much inspired by that. And once again, there's mythology in here, but there are also these diaries of Narcisse. Ultimately, the story didn't go where I thought it was going to go. Ultimately, this story ended up being a snapshot of what I imagine is going to be this longer story. I realised that that was never going to be the story we were told, because this is a story about finally letting things go, getting rid of darkness within us. And whilst we get to see Vian's magic, and Vian is a character in here, this isn't her story, nor is it Rosette's story, nor is it Renaud's story. They are all here to help us rebuild the life of Narcisse, but also find forgiveness within themselves. And it's only a short book. It went incredibly quickly. It is so full of richness and character. The language at times can be a bit verbose and purple, but it also lent itself well to the fairy tale aspects. And there's this sense of worship within the novel, be it worshipping the Christian God, worshipping nature, or worshipping gods of ancient cultures. I'm honestly astounded. I look at Peaches for Monsieur le Curé, and I look at the Lollipop Shoes, and I think of Chocolat, and I think about all the things those books did, but I still think of them from what I imagine now is a childlike perspective, and I want to go back and I want to see what was hiding beneath the surface, because I feel as though I've missed a lot of stuff. And maybe it's just that I've missed these characters and I've missed this world. But upon completion of this book, I just felt as though I didn't want it to end yet. And I realised that this was a story of the village. This has ruined the first question in my mid-year freakout tag, because I said as though I didn't think I'd find a new favourite in the end of June, but I didn't expect to read this in June. It's a shock to have found a book that has so quickly catapulted to the top of my list as being a favourite. Earlier this week, I was watching a video from Rachel Marie of Rachel Marie Book Junkie, in which she read Middle Game by Shauna Maguire and said that that book was a perfect book for her. And she asked me what a Charlie book was. I immediately thought of The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon and Things in Jars by Jess Kidd, but I never thought of Joanne Harris. And I should have done, because hers are the books that she has written, books that have this everyday magic in them that I'm quite partial to. She also focuses on the family, and whilst this might be found family, I don't think that it's any less important. And these are the things that I like to see in literature, but also there's this discussion of faith, and I like to see religion represented in literature in a way that isn't tearing it down. It's opening up discussion about faith, and not just Christianity. Within Peaches from Monsieur Le Carré, we had this war between Christianity and Islam, but it was never about that war. It was about tons of different battles that have gone on throughout the past that set us apart from each other, when really they should be the things that bring us together. And once again, we find that within this novel, because of everyone having a doppelganger, really, a mirror image of themselves, which is this darker version of themselves. In this book, we got the tattooist who opens right across the road from Vianne's shop, and Reynard is finding the mirror image in Narcisse and Rosette and Yannick. Joanne Harris shows you more about her characters by showing these other characters and saying, look, this is the opposite of them. And it's just enthralling to read as a writer and think and just see how much another writer has grown. And this is so skillful and so masterful, and I am just in awe of Joanne Harris's art right now. I'm mildly sad to have finished this book. I'm still annoyed at 15-year-old Charlie, who for 1 week saw Joanne Harris's work as woman's fiction, because 15-year-old Charlie still had mild pieces of sexism ingrained into him. And, you know, there was only that 1 week before I picked up the Lollipop Shoes and I started reading it. And I'm glad that I did. And I'm glad I got over all my notions, because I found a writer who is still managing to engage me and entangle me into the world she has created. And I am extremely grateful for that. And I don't know that this book is for everyone, similar to something Matthew was saying from MCS Books yesterday about Ernesto and how he loves that book, but he doesn't know that he's going to be able to recommend it to everyone. I get that with this book, because I have recommended Joanne Harris to people before and they just don't get it. And I don't care, because I do. And there are a ton of people out there who read her and enjoy her. I just mean the people in the social circles I'm part of. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself now, because Lord, did I adore this book. And I'm sorry that I finished it so quickly. This wasn't really a review or a discussion or anything. It was just me gushing and rambling. I understand that. If you do end up going out and reading this book, please do let me know what you thought of it. If you've read anything else by Joanne Harris and would like to discuss that, please feel free to do so in the comments. I hope that you have got something out of this video. Maybe you have even enjoyed yourself. Until next time, that is all.